Greg Musselman is Vice President of Outreach for Voice of the Martyrs. It's an organization perhaps you've not heard of. You have heard of Richard Wurmbrand, I would think, over the years, and he was the one who founded Voice of the Martyrs. It's a ministry that is dealing with the persecuted church around the world, and Greg Musselman is here. He's written a book called Closer to the Fire, Lessons from the Persecuted Church. Greg, you've been there, done that in terms of many of these nations where the church is being persecuted, and as I was reading your book, I was surprised. Well, maybe I wasn't surprised, but you say in the book that the worst place to live on the planet, if you're a Christian, is North Korea.
Right, yeah, because you've got that the cult of the Kim family. Yeah. And statistics and those that we work with that work in North Korea say about 30,000 Christians are imprisoned, and many of them are executed or killed. There is absolutely no religious freedom, and you're familiar with the Juche system, which is really just a copy of Christianity, including the Trinity. And they're so brainwashed that in that country, it's hard for people to to share the gospel because they're fearful that they may be turned in. So they're living under constant persecution. But yet, in the midst of that, the Lord is still working.
You mentioned a pastor, a Mr. Kim, bringing Jesus to the evil empire. Just quickly, tell us his story.
Well, Mr. Kim was somebody that was not a Christian and had heard the Christian message and responded to it, and became to a point where he became very passionate about it, escape from the country, and I mean the journey out of North Korea for him and many others it's just so intense. You go through China, and there's all the different things that go on, and constantly at risk in their lives. And so he made his way out into Seoul, where we had actually met with an organization that worked with him, and actually brought him to Canada and had him sharing in some churches in Edmonton area. And just an amazing story. He actually was high up in the army, and he actually wrote hymns to the Kim family, and then after coming to the Lord, he was able to write songs under the Lord. But he had actually, when it was found out that he had become a Christian, he was going to be executed, and he was on a train, and he jumped out of the train, and as he said, his body aged 1,000 years, and that always gets a good response from the people. But the fact that he was able to survive was absolutely miraculous, and he did escape, and is now working in North Korea.
Yeah, and where does he live?
He lives in South Korea, in Seoul.
In Seoul,
yeah.
Right. Remarkable story. Now, another place where the church is being severely persecuted is Iraq, and you brought some footage. Let's take a look at it.
In the past decade, Islamic militants stepped up their attacks against Christians, and the persecution against believers has become particularly vicious. The most brutal attacks started in the south and moved north, causing a mass exodus of Christians. Half to two-thirds of the country's Christians have left Iraq since 2003.
I am not saying that there is any Christian at the south part, but since 2003 until today, about 80% of the Christians at the south, they came to Baghdad, and after that to the northern part of Iraq.
Pastor Hytham says things were relatively peaceful for the Christians in the middle part of the country, but then that changed.
After 2005, they start to kidnap them, to kill them, to explode their church buildings. So after 2005, most of the Christians at the middle part of Iraq, they also came to the northern part of Iraq.
For the Christians who remain in Iraq, life is difficult. It's hard to find an Iraqi Christian who has not been directly affected by the brutal violence against the church. Odishu Makil is the village leader of Banasur in Iraqi Kurdistan that is made up of Christians who fled Mosul and Baghdad.
They started in Mosul killing us as Christians. If they found out our IDs as Christians, they kill us. Whole families were killed, children, adults, parents. They killed the families. It was very dangerous to live there.
24-year-old Afnan knows this danger. Her husband worked as a security guard at a factory. He was the only Christian among his Muslim co-workers who tried to force him to leave his job and get money out of him. When he refused both demands, he would pay with his life, leaving Afnan a widow of 2 small children.
When they put us in the room, it was 6:30 in the evening. They kept us there while they beat my husband. We heard the beating until 1 o'clock. Then I heard a shot. They just shot him.
Like Afnan, Jaber Hikmad has been traumatized by the brutality of Muslim extremists. The 41-year-old married father of 3 fled Baghdad with his family in 2006 after being threatened by Al-Qaeda and came to Iraqi Kurdistan.
The situation was very bad. I knew as a Christian that Muslim radicals, Al-Qaeda, threatened all Christians, so we left. We were targets. We lived in a difficult area and, of course, lived in fear. One day I saw them kill another Christian, a man who lived on the same street. I didn't want my family to see that kind of thing. I felt it was important to leave.
But Jaber's parents stayed in Baghdad. In December 2010, they were attacked in their home by Muslim militants because they were Christians.
They followed my mother into the kitchen. They beat her there and took her to another room and beat her again. And then they took her into the bathroom and cut her neck like a cross and put a knife in her chest. They crushed her nose. They did the same thing to my father. He tried to escape, but they got him on the stairs. They cut his neck and smashed his nose. He died like that. I saw their bodies.
As a result of the brutal murder of his parents, Jaber suffered a mental breakdown. He's been unable to find work, and his family's future is uncertain. And that's the challenge many Iraqi Christians are facing, not knowing what will come next. Pastor Haitham leads a church in Kirkuk that is active in reaching their community with the gospel, and that has led to several attacks. On one occasion, militant Muslims placed a package of bombs at the door of the church. The timer on the package of bombs stopped 1 minute before it was to explode, which Pastor Haitham says was a miracle. Another time, the bomb squad blew up a vehicle on the spot near the church. In spite of the dangers, he has no plans to leave the country and wants his fellow Christians to stay as well.
We have some churches in this country which had been built in the first Christian century. So, as a believer, I am not talking as a pastor, I don't want my country to be empty from the Christianity.
Now, Greg, Angela Merkel just said, I think yesterday, that Christianity is the most persecuted faith in the world. Is she right?
Absolutely. I mean, many Muslims, of course, are killed, but you get the conflict between the Shiite and Sunnis, as you know, in Iraq and around places like that. But a religious group that is targeted because of their faith, absolutely Christians by a wide margin.
You know, when I was reading your book, I mean, there's gripping stories in here, and we'll tell you how to get it in a minute, friends. But the thing that really got to me, and I never have heard of this before, prisoners in Eritrea in containers.
Shipping containers.
Shipping containers. I don't know if, you know, this is a pretty small picture here, but why don't we just try zooming in right by my finger there. Look at those. Those are metal containers with prisoners in them. I mean, how do they survive the heat?
Well, that's the question. I mean, there's no ventilation, there's no bathroom facilities. No. It's just absolutely brutal. And the statistics we've been hearing, up to 4,000. That's the shipping containers and also the military prisons, where you've also got scorching heat as well. And I know for me, and I sometimes get very emotional when I talk about this, but I was there 8.5 years ago before they really shut things down, because in May 2002, the government, pressured by the state church to close down the evangelical churches, which they class as American. They're bringing down the country. In fact, we were accused of being CIA spies by just doing a report on it. And so they started then to close the churches down, and then when the Christians still continued to meet, they would go to their homes and arrest them. They'd go to weddings and arrest them. And we've heard statistics now of up to 4,000 Christians, almost every evangelical pastor, several which I met 8.5 years ago, and shortly after we left, they were arrested, and they've still been sitting in prison, and they have families, and I mean, it's just awful. And some of them have gotten sick, and they would be given medical treatment if they would renounce their evangelical faith, and they refused to do it.
Now, you mentioned evangelical. Did they also persecute the Orthodox Christians?
Well, originally the Orthodox, leaders were the ones that were kind of pushing against the evangelical churches. But there was also, as you know, because you work in Ethiopia, there's been a lot of renewal within the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia and also Eritrea. And when some of the leaders were starting to stand up within the Orthodox Church, what was going on to the evangelicals and those that had been arrested within the Orthodox Church that were involved in renewal movements, then you had a situation where the Orthodox Church was starting to speak out. But then, the top leader within the Orthodox Church was removed, and the government put their own person in there. So they're controlling it. So Orthodox people and evangelicals, Pentecostals, Baptists have all been arrested.
Now, I'm going to have you on again sometime in the next few weeks, and you'll look forward to that, friends, because I know you're going to really find this interesting. But just in 30 seconds, what impact is this ministry having on you personally, Greg?
Well, it's been difficult. I've had to seek out some counseling. I'm thankful for brothers and sisters in the body of Christ that have said, look, this kind of ministry is pretty intense, and of the hundreds of believers we've met, we've cried with a lot of people, and we've ministered to them. I think what ultimately gets you through is the hope that we have that this is not how it ends. It's eternity that we hope for.
I look forward to talking to you again, Greg. Greg Musselman, Voice of the Martyrs. Here's his book. Closer to the Fire, Lessons from the Persecuted Church. A real gripper, friends, and you can get it by calling 1-800-265-3100 or logging on to crossroads.ca, and it's ready there for your purchase at our e-store. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Jim.
We'll talk again. Let's go to Moira.
And let's be praying for Greg and persecuted brothers and sisters around the world. I'm so thankful he made it out of Edmonton before the full